Good morning. It is Friday morning, a nice, cool, somewhat humid day. I hope it's been a good week for you and that the weekend ahead will be excellent also. I've been thinking a lot about the different opinions and strong feelings that are going around these days, and wondering how it is that we best navigate forward as a church. Of course, I'm thinking specifically about coming out of this COVID time. I'm thinking about the different opinions that people have about vaccines, about the restrictions and the lockdowns. And we know that some people feel very strongly about these things one way or the other, don't they? And sometimes it can be a real challenge to navigate through that. We're a small church, but we have most of the opinions represented among us. So sometimes it can be hard. As a pastor, I wonder, how do I navigate through the middle in times like this? Naturally, we tend to hold our position close and feel that, I think we generally assume that the position we hold is the right one. I don't think anyone deliberately holds to a wrong position. You believe something and hold it because you think it's true. And naturally, if that's what you hold, you assume that the other side is wrong. So it can make life very challenging, can't it? Especially with something so significant like what we've been going through this past year. So how do we, again, survive and thrive and love one another when we have different opinions on big issues? Well, I'm immediately reminded of those episodes in the Gospels where the disciples came up against moments where it was different than they expected, or they encountered people that thought and believed things differently than themselves. And I'm encouraged by this because I'm sure you can think of some examples of how they treated others that were different. Whether it be a shouting leper or a blind man, what do they often do but try to shush them? You think of the parents trying to bring little children to Jesus, and what did they do? They tried to discourage it. Get these kids out of here. You think of the town that rejected Jesus and wanted nothing to do with him, and you think of, was it James and John that said, "Lord, would you have us call down fire from heaven? Shall we burn them alive?" That was their response to a group that rejected their beliefs. So again, it's human nature to feel strongly when others disagree with your position. And you know how it is. Some of us get very passionate about our beliefs, and we want to defend it and fight it and shout from the rooftops. And that can be a good thing, that passion, of course. But again, when it comes to the life of the church, we need to think differently. This morning I was reading in Matthew 16, and at the end of the chapter there, we have Peter's famous confession. And then we have Jesus beginning to tell them his destiny, what awaits him in Jerusalem, his suffering, his betrayal, his death, and his resurrection, which they don't seem to hear the first many times that he tells them. But after telling them this again for the first time, that he would suffer, we know what Peter's response was. He hears this, and this is not what he wants to hear. This is not what he believed would happen. He had a much different vision of the future. And so, again, he famously takes Jesus aside and rebukes him. I mean, think about that. not only about the absurdity of it, but think about how strongly he must have felt, how firm his convictions must have been to have the gall to take Jesus aside and rebuke him and say, "May God forbid what you've just said." I mean, it always astounds me, that story. And what did Jesus do? Jesus shows a little bit of a different response, because whereas in those earlier incidents I mentioned, whether it be the shouting blind man or the children or that rejecting city, he didn't condemn them, did he, in those moments? In fact, he showed grace and patience, lots of mercy over the years. He spoke with people and loved them, touched them, talked to them when no one else would. So we know that ours is a merciful Lord and cared for others. But in this moment, following Peter's rebuke, Jesus gives us an important principle that we need to remember. He, of course, says, "Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the things of God, but rather the things of men." And so he does speak very firmly to Peter. And I can just imagine how horrified he was in that moment. But Jesus' words are important for us to remember. It helps us, I hope, to realize that sometimes our firmest of convictions still need to be held with great caution. You might be convinced of something, whether it be about a vaccine or lockdowns or whatever else it may be. You might feel very firmly that the evidence is clear about what the truth is. Well, you may be right, but even if you are, you still need that grace and wisdom to realize that we're like Peter. We might think we have it all figured out, but we need to keep our own limitations in view. We need to have humility with ourselves. And Jesus gives us the most important principle, again saying, "You do not have in mind the things of God, but of men." We need to check our motives. We need to check our pride. We need to check whether we are putting God first and his people first and the grace of the Lord Christ first, rather than our own ideas, assumptions, hopes, and understandings. We need to submit those to God, pray for wisdom, pray for grace. So in these days of highly charged times, keep your humility in check. Choose grace first, and pray that the Lord would always reveal his heart and mind to all of us above all else. So that being said, have a great weekend. God bless you, and I thank you, our church, for the wonderful and grace-filled community that we are. Have a great weekend. God bless.